Hey folks, so today we are going to be talking Marvel Midnight Suns, and we're going to be talking about the characters in them, the companions that you get in the game. And basically we're going to be talking about the description of them, so kind of what do they do, their strengths, what are they good at, their weaknesses, what are they weak at, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the best cards and kind of how to play them. So just to kind of introduce this, I've finished the game on Ultimate 3, which is the hardest difficulty, and then I've started New Game Plus on Ultimate 3 again, and I've played about halfway through that because I wanted to get the proper kind of insights on the early game of Ultimate 3, because the way the difficulty in this game works is you can't just start off with the hardest difficulty, you have to unlock it as you play through. So I have a very good idea now after I don't know how long I've played now, but quite a long time, of what the end game is like in Ultimate 3, but also what the beginning is like as well. On that, we are going to be talking on an Ultimate 3 level here, but if you are playing on a lower difficulty, I think this video is still very much applicable because it just kind of filters down, right? I mean, if a character is very strong in Ultimate 3, chances are they're going to be very strong on whatever difficulty you might be playing at as well. There are some cases where characters are strong on a lower difficulty but do get weak on Ultimate 3, but I will point those out when we come to them. Before we start going into the individual characters, I just want to point out as well, mods are very much a thing in this game. If you don't know what they are basically an additional keyword that you can add to everyone's cards. They can change what the card does pretty drastically. So you might have a very weak card on a very weak character that gets just the absolute perfect mod. And that character then might be very, very strong in your playthrough. Because there are so many mods and because there are so many cards, there's a lot of kind of like variability there. It's just not possible for me to talk about that. But just to say, take all of this with the knowledge that if you get a very good mod on a character that I'm saying might be quite weak, that might change the character. Now, it's unlikely. Usually, a strong character will get stronger with a mod. A weak character will maybe move up a little bit with a mod, but sometimes you can just get a god tier roll and you just have to take that as it comes. So, without further ado, let's get into our first character, and that is Blade. So Blade, what is he? Well, he's a selfish damage dealer who uses a bleed mechanic. So what do I mean by selfish damage dealer? Well, Blade has a lot of cards that really only work for him. He has a lot of damage cards that he can output, and then he has some utility, like he has he can draw cards for himself, he can apply bleed onto his cards and such, but he won't provide much utility for the team. So just to talk about Bleed a little bit before we get into the strengths and weaknesses. If you've played these types of games before, you know what I'm talking about here. Bleed is a debuff that you apply onto enemies that ticks for damage after they've made their turn. If you played Slay the Spire, you know poison, all that kind of stuff. Bleed, it's important to talk about Bleed before we get into strengths and weaknesses because I think it's quite a weak mechanic in Midnight Suns. And why do I think that? I think that for two reasons. So how does it apply the damage? Well, again, with damage over time abilities, they kind of delay the value of the damage, right? So you might get a little bit of damage up front or sometimes no damage up front, but then you kind of get that buyback then when the dot ticks, whenever the bleed ticks. So in this game, you'll apply the bleed, and sometimes you'll do a little bit of damage. Then you'll end your turn, the enemies will go, and then the bleed damage will tick. So that's not great, mostly because of the rule of numbers. So if you're familiar with like Dungeons and Dragons or any kind of strategy, really kind of turn-based strategy game, you'll know about the rule of numbers, and that is generally the team with the greater amount of actions will beat the team with a fewer amount of actions. And in Marvel Midnight Suns, that's very much the case. You are bringing in way fewer heroes to the enemies that you're facing, and your goal is to reduce the number of those enemies as fast as possible before they get their turn, and so you don't have to deal with as many actions coming at you. So what is good for that? Well, upfront damage is very good for that. You want to kill the thing before it gets to act. But with bleed, you'll remember I said that it ticks after the enemy acts. So you'll apply the bleed, the enemy will do their action and then they might die. So even if you apply, lethal bleed damage to a target, they will still get to act one more time. And when you're talking about the rule of numbers and when you're talking about reducing enemy actions, the stuff that you have to deal with, bleed is very, very bad for that. The second reason why bleed isn't great is the way kills work in Marvel Midnight Suns, right? So when you're really popping off, you're doing so by generating something on a kill. So if you've played this game, you'll know the quick keyword, right? That's loads of characters have a quick card, and that basically is when you use a quick card and you kill something with it, you don't use up a card play, right? So that's kind of what I mean. You're getting something done, you're getting an action done, and you're being rewarded for it, right? There's other things in the game as well, like for Marked, for example, which is a debuff that you can apply to enemies, which means when you it turns an enemy into a quick, basically. So if you kill the enemy with Marked, you get your card play back. That's very, very useful. And then there are other kind of cards in the game that say on a KO, you get this out of the other, right? So when you're really popping off in Midnight Suns, you're killing things and you're getting something back, okay? Bleed doesn't work like that, again, because bleed ticks after your turn. So you're not getting anything back with bleed, you're just getting a dead enemy. So with that said, what do I think of Blade? Well, surprisingly, Blade is actually pretty good, okay? And I know what I said about Bleed, and that still holds true, but let's talk about his strengths. So, first thing that needs to be said about Blade before we get into Bleed is he just has very good early damage cards, right? So if you've watched any of my Slay to Spire guides, you'll know that I'm a big fan of cards in the early game that just do upfront good damage, right? And that was very good in Slay to Spire. It's very good in Midnight Suns as well, right? In the early game, especially on like higher difficulties, you're going to be running up against enemies that have health pools that you just cannot really deal with most of the heroes. A lot of the heroes kind of take a bit of time to get all their cards together, to get the pieces together, and they just start off with pretty weak cards, specifically pretty weak damage cards. Blade doesn't, right? Blade just comes in with cards like Stake and cards like Relentless, which just does good upfront damage, and that is a godsend in the early game. Right? It's as simple as that. Good upfront damage. So, the bleed mechanic. The bleed mechanic is very useful against an enemy type called the Revenant, basically, because Revenant has a passive that will attack something that's bleeding. And if you are applying bleed to anything on the field with a Revenant in play, you completely mess up the Revenant's action. Once you get to the mid game, you start seeing the Lilin more and more, and you start seeing Revenants more and more, and they're quite nasty to deal with. Blade just trivializes them. Right, so when you're into the mid game, when you know you're going into a battle with Lilin, and there's a Revenant there, Blade is very, very good. So that's niche, but Revenants are kind of so annoying that Blade is quite good. The other reason you'll take him is because of two cards that make the bleed mechanic actually good, right? And those cards are Daywalker, and specifically, really what we're talking about here is Reaper. So with Reaper, all those bleed stacks that you're kind of like adding onto the enemies as you're playing your turn, Reaper gets rid of the problem with bleed, which is it ticks after the enemy's turn, right? Reaper consumes all the bleed stacks and does massive damage. When you get these cards, Blade finds a niche in the game, and that is doing really high damage to single target high health enemies, and you are going to come up against them quite a lot in the late game, especially if you're playing on high difficulty. I've come up against enemies with 1500 health that are really difficult to wear down, especially because most of the time in the game you're going to be dealing with multiple enemies, so you want to bring in heroes that are very good at dealing damage to multiple enemies. But then when a real big guy comes in, it gets a bit tough. Blade is so good against them. You use Daywalker. I mean, you don't really need Daywalker, but Daywalker and Reaper just combine so well together. You use Daywalker, you use Reaper, you've just done a ton of damage, right? You can obviously add on more bleed stacks if you want as well. Doesn't have to be a 2-card combo, but he is just so good at doing that. So when you put those things together, bleed actually starts to be really, really good. But he does have his weaknesses. So what are they? Well, in the mid game, when his early damage cards have fallen off a bit, but you don't have the bleed combo together, so you're not reliably, maybe you mightn't have Reaper at all, or you're not reliably getting kind of bleed combos up to activate the Reaper. or you're just not coming up against, you haven't reached the high health enemies yet, so you don't need the bleed combo massive burst of damage that Blade can do. He's not great. So, your early damage cards just aren't doing enough, and the wombo combo isn't there. So he just kind of falls off there. And then the other way he's not good is against multiple enemies. Blade is someone who is very, very good at single target, but can't really deal with the multi-target stuff. So if you're in a fight and there are no kind of like real chunky enemies there that you can do the wombo combo on, and you need someone to deal with lots of little threats, you don't want Blade in there. So what are his best cards? Well, pretty obvious here. Stake and Relentless in the early game, but I'm including them here just because they're so useful in the early game, and the early game is so hard on New Game Plus on Ultimate 3. Blade is just so good with those cards. But really you're talking about Daywalker, and you're very much talking about Reaper. That is what makes him pop off. That is his saving grace in the late game, because the bleed mechanic on its own is just not good enough. Reaper makes the bleed mechanic great. So overall, Blade is a good hero. He's a very solid hero. He very much has his niche. Very good against Revenants, very good against high health enemies. You just need to understand about how you can actually properly utilize the bleed mechanic, because if you're not using Reaper, he's crap. But if you're putting him against high health enemies with Reaper, very, very good hero, very, very useful. Okay, next up we have Captain Marvel. So, who is Captain Marvel? Well, she is a tank with some backup damage. Her special unique kind of feature is when you play 3 of her cards, you get the Go Binary card, which is a free to use card, gives you a decent amount of block, and turns her binary, which means her cards are supercharged basically. A lot of her cards will say, do this thing, and if you're binary, do this thing. So you want to get her into binary mode as quickly as possible. So what are her strengths? Well, she is a pretty good damage dealer with binary. She can combine counter with resist, which is a pretty strong combination. And then she also has a quick card with damage to generate her own binary. So you get her into binary, you can deal a decent amount of damage with her for a tank, and then you build up a load of resists, you stick counter on her, and she'll be able to then continue doing damage while she's actually tanking. What are her weaknesses? Well, she's hugely reliant on binary. Hugely. So when I spoke about binary earlier, you may have thought, oh, it's like supercharging her cards, but I don't think that's the right way to think about it. It's not that her cards are supercharged with binary, they're just turned into decent cards. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if you're not binary, her cards are terrible. If you're binary, her cards are cards. They're good, decent cards. So very, very much needs to get binary as soon as possible. Which brings me on to my next point. If you draw poorly, binary can be awkward to set up. So what do I mean draw poorly? I mean you don't draw quick jab basically, which is her way of setting it up. This is really bad, especially in threatening opening turns. So you'll go into a mission, especially I've noticed this in the early game in Ultimate 3, and there'll just be a ton of damage coming your way, and the cards that you've been given for Captain Marvel, you don't really want to use them. But if you're not using them, if you're not putting into binary on turn 1, she's weak in turn 1 and then she's weak in turn 2, and you just need to play those 3 cards as quickly as you can. And for a character who's generally not that, I wouldn't consider her a selfish character, I guess her opening is quite selfish because you want to play 3 cards on her as quickly as possible. Now, I did mention Quick Jab. We'll talk about that in the best cards. Quick Jab is her way to set it up because it's a damage with quick and you can spin it. But none of her other cards really are great for setting up binary. And then her biggest weakness is a kind of a high difficulty weakness. So at the intro, I kind of mentioned there are some heroes that are very different on high difficulty modes. Captain Marvel is one of them. Her huge weakness here is when she loses her block, she loses binary. Okay, and on higher difficulties, especially Ultimate 3, the numbers are quite high, right? There's a lot of damage floating around, and even the best of tanks, it's very difficult for them not to lose their block on a turn because you can only stack block up to your maximum health, right? So you can't just like put on a ridiculous amount of block. So in Ultimate 3, you're playing a tank with block who doesn't want to lose all of her block, because if you do, you lose binary and she ends up being a way weaker character. So what ends up happening on Ultimate 3 is you have to be so careful about the damage she's taking, right? She's your tank, but you're concerned about the damage she's taking. And this is just so nasty. Like, she has a card called Photon Beam, which is a really flashy card, and it's one that I really liked at the start. You know, shoots decent damage in a straight line and taunts everything. But you can't use it in the higher difficulties, because if you're taunting a bunch of enemies, you're going to lose your block and you're going to lose your binary. And that is just so painful. And what are you bringing a tank for in that case, right? If you're bringing a tank that doesn't want to actually tank, you're really just bringing a damage dealer, right? And there are far better damage dealers out there than Captain Marvel. So it's very, very awkward. Again, though, this is a higher difficulty thing, right? What are our best cards? We spoke about this one. Quick Jab. It's a funny, kind of simple card to have as our best card, but just because of how binary works, it's so useful. If you draw 2 Quick Jabs in your opening hand, it feels so good. You're getting binary on turn 1. You're not really using any cards to do it. Brilliant. Really, really good. What else is good? Bring It On. That's the card I was talking about with the resist and the counter. Very, very nice. Again, though, caveat, you're taunting as Captain Marvel. You need to be really careful what you're taunting. Now, you are taunting with resist, right? So that's quite nice. But still, you have to be careful. And then Regroup. So Regroup is just nice because it's a card that you want on a tank. It adds block, gives you health. If things are kind of like looking dicey, really the health bit is funnily enough, it's not, like, because there's so little healing in the game, you think, a healing card, brilliant. It's actually the block you really want this for, because of how important it is to maintain binary. Adding block is just so important. I do want to give a little nod to Supernova here, which is her what do they call it? Legendary card, I think. It's really, really good if you can get a good mod for it, right? Because it's map wide damage, huge AoE damage. Any card like that does massive AoE damage, if you get a good mod on it, it's like, like if you add marked to it, if you add vulnerable to it, for example. It's just brilliant, right? It's just so good. So how do we sum up Captain Marvel? She is very much one of those heroes that changes depending on the difficulty, okay? If you're on a difficulty that you can safely maintain binary and tank with her at the same time, so if you think that she is providing good tanking efficiency and you're not losing binary on her, she's a strong hero. She's a good tank, right? She does decent damage. She's very hard to hurt with all of her resists if you're maintaining binary, and she has a counter added on top of that. Then she gets super duper strong if you're adding Supernova to that with a good mod. Then she becomes extremely strong. But if you're on higher difficulties and you're really struggling to use her as a tank and maintain her block, she just feels so bad, like so bad. You turn her into like a half tank. Your other characters that you're bringing, you have to kind of respond to that. If you can't just like tank up a bunch of high damage hits because you're afraid the high damage will knock you out of binary, then your other squishier heroes are going to have to deal with that, right? So you want to pair her up with heroes that can conceal themselves, right? Or that can banish themselves, for example. Or you want to pair her up with another tank, but that feels really bad because then your damage drops, right? So that is the issue with Captain Marvel. If you can maintain binary, fair play to you. She's a good hero. My experience on the higher difficulties is I can't, or, I can, but I'm having to half tank her, and that just does not feel good. Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange is a support hero with a bit of damage utility. So what do I mean when I say support hero? Well, he doesn't tank any of the enemies, he doesn't provide much damage, but all of his cards help in various different ways. So he can apply modifiers to enemies, he can apply buffs to your allies, he has a heal, etc, etc. So that's kind of what a support is. There's very few all-out supports in the game. I would say there's probably 2, and Doctor Strange is one of them. He has no real special mechanic, but he does have a lot of very different cards that provide a wide array of options. His cards are pretty straightforward, but they're unique and quite different. So let's talk about his strengths. Where do you start here? this guy can just do everything. It's incredible. He can give you 4 card play turns. He can apply weak, bind, and vulnerable to enemies. He can provide resist party-wide to your allies, along with cure. He has a card that can conceal himself or allies. He has a heal. He has a quick. He has too many things, right? He's just too strong of a character. I was doing up a tier list just for my friends, and I kind of realized I had to make a tier right at the top called the Doctor Strange tier, because even the really strong companions in this game, he's just a little bit better than them. You bring him, and there's never a moment where a card of his isn't extremely useful. Like, if you're on top, he has really nice debuffs for your enemies. If you're struggling, if you're taking a lot of damage, or you have a really hard turn coming up, his buffs to your party will just completely counter that. And specifically the card Vapors of Voltor. I don't usually put just a single card in the strengths list here, but this card is just broken, absolutely broken. We'll talk about that in the best cards list. And also his passive is incredible. Like, he is one of the best passes in the game, which when you have it fully leveled up, has a 50% chance to provide you with 2 heroism at the start of a turn, which is just incredible. So his weaknesses, I mean, there's nothing here really. Like, if I'm being picky and just filling out the list because I have to, his damage doesn't compare with others, and the other support that we'll talk about later, he doesn't bring as much damage as she does, but you're not picking him for damage. You know, that's not why you're bringing Doctor Strange. I can't put anything in this list that kind of I could actually stand beside. The guy has no weaknesses. So, best cards. Vapors. I'm going to go with Vapors of Voltor. I mentioned this in the strengths. Let's just talk about this for a second. I think this might be the best card in the game. Like, it's certainly the best card the companions have, and I would say better than any hunter card you get. Conceal in this game, in my opinion, feels like a bug because it breaks the game. Okay, so the way it works, if you don't realize, when you apply Conceal to the enemy, to the target that it's attacking, the enemy just will skip its turn, right? It won't redirect its attack. It won't do like half damage or anything like that. It will just miss a turn. So with Vapors of Voltor, what you do is you pair him up with a tank that can taunt a load of enemies, and then you just put in Vapors of Voltor, and now you just neutralize the entire round. You know, all of the enemies that have been taunted are just not doing anything. There's a little bit of counterplay to this in terms of, so Vapors of Voltor is a conceal. There is another keyword that we'll talk about later on called Banish, which does the same thing, but Conceal leaves you on the map. It just turns you invisible, right? So if you get hit by an AoE, you will be knocked out of Conceal. So there is that kind of thing that I need to add there, but really I haven't noticed it being that much a drawback at all. Vapors of Voltor, in my opinion, breaks the game. So the next up is Crimson Bands of Sadarak. This is a bind. Binds are incredible. There's another character later on that we'll talk about who has a bind, and I kind of just bring him into games for the bind. Doctor Strange has a bunch of really good cards and a bind, and not only that, it applies 1 vulnerable as well. Now, if you do damage onto the bind, it'll break the bind, but like, you know, so really what this card is, it's an either or, right? You want to apply a bind and just forget about that enemy for a turn, or you want to apply a vulnerable, right? The two together don't really make sense, but it's just a kind of either or card. Both of these keywords are really, really good. And then finally, Agamotto's Gaze. So this one here, you're not really taking it for the damage. So drawn attacks do extra damage is nice, and you're drawing attacks. So I mean, those two things on their own is okay. I mean, you know, drawing cards for a card play is decent. But what's really good here is the setup turn, right? You're setting up for a 4 card play turn next turn, and that is really, really strong. If you've played this game, you know how precious each card play is, and so when you're adding another one of that, it just gives you so much strength. So to sum up Doctor Strange, I'm going to talk about Baldur's Gate 2 here for a second. I have so I do a lot of tier lists just for fun, and when I'm thinking about the strengths of characters, I have a tier list in my head called the Animan tier. So Animan is a character in Baldur's Gate 2 who can do a bunch of things exceptionally well. So he can tank, he can do incredible damage, He can apply debuffs with the Flail of Ages. I'm getting way too in deep depth into Baldur's Gate 2 here. He has, he is a cleric fighter, so he has a bunch of really, really useful cleric spells. The reason I'm telling you this is Animin, in my opinion, is like the definition of a overpowered character because he can do a bunch of different things, but he can do them really, really well. And whenever you're kind of like, or whenever I am assessing characters' strengths in games like this, you're ticking boxes, right? So you're like, what does this character do? Do they bring damage? Tick. Can they tank? Tick. Can they provide utility? Tick. Doctor Strange just ticks so many boxes. Like, he provides all of the best keywords on debuffs, all of the best keywords on buffs. He has a quick, just in case you need it. He's just so strong. The problem with Doctor Strange is you never want another support, and we're going to talk about her in a little bit, but she just has a problem, and that's the other support, which is Doctor Strange, is so strong. He'll single-handedly carry you through fights with Vapors of Voltor. We've spoken about that. I'm not going to speak on it too much more. He's the strongest companion in the game. It's not even close. He starts off really, really strong. He has a good opening card list. He has a strong mid-game and remains strong in the late game. He never dips. There's never a moment. A lot of characters in this game, they have a really, really strong early game or a really strong late game, or they're kind of consistent through the whole game. They're never really, really strong, but they're never really, really weak. Doctor Strange just throws that out the window. He is incredibly strong from the very first second you start playing this game to the very end of the game. This guy has no weaknesses for what you want to bring him to. Incredible character. Ghost Rider. So Ghost Rider is primarily a damage dealer with some self-sustain. So the way he works, he has a lot of cards that will take up his health in order to use. So he'll basically hurt himself while using his cards. And this other thing is he has this thing called the soul meter. So basically that will fill as you kill enemies, and it'll do two things. It'll increase your maximum health, and that can happen twice, I think, when you've fully leveled up, and it will spawn a copy of the Drain Soul card. So that's Ghost Rider's kind of mechanic. Basically, you kill things, you do damage to yourself while you kill things, but by doing so, you fill your soul meter, so you get max increased health. So what are his strengths? Well, the first big one is he brings a huge source of AoE damage in the early game with the card Hellride. So this is at the start of the game. This is like your finisher. When you bring Ghost Rider really above any other character in the early game, you save up for Hellride for the really big turns. The beauty about Hellride as well is it never really scales away. So Hellride is incredibly good in the early game, but even in the late game, it's one of the best AoE damage cards that you're going to get. So it's just such a strong card. He has, in my opinion, the best quick in the game with the card Lash. And since it's the best quick in the game, I would say it's one of the best cards in the game as well. You can just generate quick off this so easily. A lot of the time with cards that have quick, sometimes it's difficult to generate value out of them. So you'll hit something and kill it and you'll get quick, but all you've really done is just kill a minion without using a card play. The really good uses of quick is, yes, killing your target, but then also doing something else. So usually what that means is punting it into something, whether that be an explosive, a ley line, which is like the dream, or just into another enemy. So you can kill the minion, generate quick, and do something else, which is usually get chip damage on other enemies. Lash makes this incredibly easy because it's a forceful knockback in any direction. So if there are any ley lines in the map, you are absolutely just whipping a minion into a ley line to trigger it, whipping an enemy into that Hydra specialist enemy with the shock shield, no problem, you can do that so easily. Whipping them into stun boxes, like the kind of like electric power boxes you can get in the map to generate stun, easy peasy. Lash is just an incredibly good card. And he has brilliant self-sustain, which I mentioned at the top of this, with the card Straight to Hell. So the beauty about Straight to Hell is, we spoke about with Doctor Strange, that Doctor Strange has Conceal and how incredibly good that is. But Straight to Hell removes you from the map. There's another card that does this as well that we'll talk about up with Magik, but there's no counterplay to this. Once you're off the map, you're just uninteractable. So at least with Doctor Strange, even though that card Vapors of Voltor is absolutely broken, if you get unlucky or if you play badly, you'll go into Conceal and you might get hit by an AoE and then you're out of Conceal and you're in trouble. Straight to hell, nope, you're away from the map, you are not being touched. The only kind of proviso of this is Ghost Rider doesn't have any taunt. So you can't, just break the game by taunting up everything and then going straight to hell. But it does just mean he is so difficult to kill once you have this card in your hand. Another strength, he just brings huge damage numbers. So we spoke about Hellride, but also he gets his legendary Penance Stare towards the end of the game, and that does unbelievable single target damage. You will just delete enemies out of this game with that card. And that makes up for Hellride, because the thing about Hellride is it does really good damage, but it's an AoE, right? So when you're up against the really high health enemies in this game, Hellride is good, but is it worth using 3 heroism? Sometimes if you're only up against big health enemies, Hellride can feel a little bit wasted, but Penance Stare is just so good on them. The final strength I want to list here, and I'm going to talk about this more in the summary, so I'll just briefly talk about it here. He doesn't take much setup to become one of the best damage dealers in the game, so he really just needs Hellride at the start and he's already one of your best damage dealers, and then he just needs to pick up 2 more cards, which is Lash and Straight to Hell, and all of a sudden you have one of the best characters in the game. He's just so easy to set up. So what are his weaknesses? When the game starts off, you're literally just bringing him from Hellride. The rest of his cards are not good, really. It kind of becomes that thing where you bring Ghost Rider plus 2 other companions, and you're just using the companions to generate 3 heroism so you can use Hellride. And then because it discards your entire hand, you have to be kind of careful when you're using it. So in the early game, I don't want to say he struggles, because he's still incredibly useful with Hellride, but he is a bit awkward to use, a little bit. A lot of his cards are mediocre, which is the next weakness. Like, he is basically a 3-card character for a lot of the game. And then when you get Penance Stare towards the end, he's a 4-card character. Some of his other cards, they do good damage, but there's just better ways to do that damage. He'll hurt himself quite a lot. You just need to be careful. And that brings me to the last point. Because he hurts himself so much, he can be in danger if he doesn't draw Straight to Hell. So usually you'll draw Straight to Hell and you'll keep it in your hand for the rest of the game until you're in a lot of trouble. But sometimes you just might get really unlucky with the draws. He might get targeted quite a lot in the first turn, for example, and then, I don't know, you haven't brought a tank or something like that, and then he's in a bit of trouble. So you just need to watch out for that. That's why the card Straight to Hell is just so important. So his best cards, I'm not going to give you any awards for guessing because I haven't shut up about these 3 cards for this whole summation. It's Hellride, Lash, and Straight to Hell. For everyone else in this bit, I'll list the best cards, but then there are other strong cards to supplement them. But not for Ghost Rider. For the majority of the game, like I said, you are just bringing Ghost Rider for those 3 cards. And then you get the legendary towards the end of the game, and now he's a 4-card character. He's definitely a contentious hero, I think. And I think mostly because he's a bit of a trap hero, right? So the initial impressions you'll get with Ghost Rider, and I don't know if you guys got this, but I certainly did. You see Drain Soul and how it scales. Then you see the Soul Meter and how that scales. And it's very easy to just think that Ghost Rider is some sort of late game carry. So the way you play him is you get a lot of kills with Drain Soul, and you're scaling Drain Soul up at the same time you're filling your Soul Meter, and then towards the end of the match he's this monster with a massively scaled up Drain Soul and a lot of health, right? That's not how you're supposed to play him, okay? I tried it, it does not work. Drain Soul doesn't scale well in the first place because it adds heroism on every time you're using it, and it's just not good. It's just not a good card. It just doesn't do enough. And then the max health, it's meh, it's whatever. It only happens twice when you've leveled up his passive fully. It just doesn't matter. He's actually an incredibly simple hero. Like I said, you're just bringing him for Hellride at the start. That's all you're supposed to do from him. Then you get Lash, and he turns into this incredible quick generating character. Then you get Straight to Hell. All of a sudden he can't be killed. That's all you need to do with him, right? He has an incredible AoE. He has the best quick in the game. And he has a self-conceal. Or it's not even a conceal, it's a better than conceal. That's all you're supposed to use him for. He looks like a complicated, high skill ceiling hero. He is absolutely not. He's a 3-card hero, and those 3 cards are really, really good. There is one more thing I want to mention here in this summary bit, and that's the difference between him and Iron Man. So we haven't spoken about Iron Man yet, but I'm going to kind of speak about their comparison here, because I do think, and I've kind of I've read a lot of stuff, I've watched a lot of tier lists, a lot of people talking about these 2 characters, and I think there's a lot of debate between the two of them, because I think in a lot of people's eyes, they're the two DPS, like full-on DPS. We'll talk about Magik in a little bit, but they're the two full-on DPS that kind of get compared to each other. And they're both, in my opinion, extremely, extremely good. The thing about Ghost Rider is, in my opinion, he doesn't require setup, right? You get Hellride right from the start of the game, and it's immediately useful. Lash is, I believe, a common, so it's, very easy to get. And Straight to Hell is, I believe, a rare, right? So, again, easy to get. He doesn't need any epics to set up, and his legendary is a nice to have, okay? He does not need his legendary to pop off. So 2 commons and a rare, that's all we're talking about, and he's one of the best heroes in the game. Iron Man, on the other hand, Ghost Rider will not reach Iron Man heights when everything is fully fleshed out. So when you're grinding and you have like all the best cards and you're modding your cards, Ghost Rider at that point won't beat Iron Man. But he is there before Iron Man, and he is consistent throughout the whole game and consistently strong. And so when you're comparing the two, that's what I would keep in mind. Ghost Rider, immediately useful, and even in a match, and we'll talk about this in the Iron Man section, when you're actually in a fight, again, you don't, you can just generate value at a Ghost Rider just by using Lash. That's it, generating quick. Whereas when you're in a fight with Iron Man, when you have everything like fully kitted out, Iron Man still requires the most attention, right? You want to be redrawing his cards to get effect. You want to be stacking your hand full of Iron Man cards for Surgical Strike. And we'll talk about that in the Iron Man section. My point is, they're both really, really good heroes. Iron Man, I think, scales a little bit better at the end of the game, but Ghost Rider has, I think, a way stronger early game and a way stronger mid game. Nico. So Nico is a support with pretty decent damage. Her mechanic is she's the RNG is fun character. So what that means is she has a lot of cards that have random effects, or they have a random damage output that's only decided when you draw the card. She also has lots of AoE damage where the targets are chosen randomly. So what is she good at? She has a very powerful heal, possibly the best heal in the game depending on who you're actually healing. She's the Wombo Combo character. So basically what that means is she has cards that can set up huge turns. So cards like Double Up and also Empower. When things are set up properly and when she's with the right teammates, these cards can set up massive turns. She can synergize extremely well with other companions. This goes back to what I was just saying. She works extremely well with Hulk, for example. Her Empower means heroic cards cost 0. Hulk has very expensive heroic cards. So if you get the right outcome, if you hit a big Hulk card, the value is just extraordinary. She has very good damage for a support, but the RNG has to be in your favor. So you have to draw her cards with like variable damage. You have to draw those cards with the highest damage outcome, or if you're using her AoE cards, you have to kind of hope that they hit the targets you want them to hit. If that happens, she actually has really strong damage. So weaknesses. RNG is just not a mechanic you want to be relying on in this game. So we kind of spoke about Blade at the top here. And when I was talking about Blade, I was talking about, you want to kill things in your turn. The whole law of numbers, you want to stop the actions coming at you, or you want to kind of trim the amount of actions that you're going to have to deal with down. RNG just does not help here at all. You want consistent cards. You want cards that you know what they're going to do. You just want to apply the debuffs that you want to apply, and when you're using AoE cards, you want to hit the targets that you want to hit. The other thing that's unreliable with her is her Wombo combos. So I mentioned in her strengths list that cards like Double Up and Empower can set up really strong turns, but they're random, so they can also just fizzle. You can pull a heroic card that you don't want, and you're playing it for 0 heroism, hooray, but you don't want to play it, and you've just used up a card play. To get the Empower, you're going to have to use a second card play to use the card that you have empowered. It's just not worth it. For a support, she's missing a lot of reliable, good debuffs. She does have a stun on a card, but it's RNG based, so it's not always going to be a stun. And she doesn't have any form of conceal at all. So she really falls down when you're although she has a really strong heal, the other kind of buffs and debuffs that you want your supports to be applying, she just doesn't have it. And finally, her damage cards can be dangerous to use. So I want to point out specifically Witchfire here. Witchfire is, when you read it on paper, a really good card. It actually outputs quite a lot of damage, but you just don't know who it's going to hit. So you know, if you're in a match and you actually have three enemies that are within Witchfire range, you cast it and then the first bolt just hits a high health enemy and now it's just wasted. It's just so unreliable. You never want to be using Witchfire. You never feel safe using Witchfire, so that means you're just going to use a different card and Witchfire ends up just not being used. So what are her best cards here? Like, she doesn't really have any is the quick answer, but I'm going to just point out Empower here. Empower, if it hits the targets you want to hit, so if you bring Hulk along and it's hitting big Hulk cards, then Empower is incredibly strong. And it doesn't have to be Hulk, right? I mean, there are a lot of heroic skills in this game with high costs. So, you know, Ghost Rider, for example, is another one. And if you're hitting these things, it feels really, really good. But sometimes you just don't hit it. But it is a good card. And her other one is Restore. So this is what I was talking about with the big heals. Again, works really well with Hulk. Hulk is going to be taking a lot of damage. He has a high maximum HP pool. Works really well there. Again, works well on Ghost Rider as well. Ghost Rider is going to be hurting himself and increasing his max HP pool. So Restore is really, really good there. So we spoke about RNG in this game. You just want reliable cards, and Nico is not reliable. And a lot of the time with Nico, you're going to use a high risk, high reward card, and it's not going to pan out, and you're just left thinking, I just could have used a more reliable card and had maybe not as effective an outcome, but an outcome that would have been like reliable. The other issue she has is and we spoke about this earlier, she's not Doctor Strange, right? So you have two main supports in this game. It's Doctor Strange and Nico. Other characters have kind of utility, but their main purpose then is either tanking or doing damage, killing things. Doctor Strange and Nico are the only two out-and-out supports, and every time you bring Nico, even with Hulk, you're just thinking, oh, I kind of wish I had Doctor Strange. And she really suffers because of that. If Doctor Strange wasn't in the game and Nico was the only full-out support, you could see her being used more, but Doctor Strange just renders her completely useless. When you pick Nico, you are always like, you know, handicapping yourself, basically. You're not min-maxing. When she pairs up with the Hulk, she can be amazing. Like, these two can pull out just incredible turns, but it sometimes doesn't work out, right? And the way you beat this game, this is not this is not that difficult a game, even on Ultimate 3 difficulty, right? You beat it through consistent, reliable card usage, right? Cards like Vapors of Valtor, I'm going to just mention again, right? That just takes you out of the turn, right? You cast it on the person who's taking a lot of damage. You know it's going to work. You're rendering a whole lot of enemies like just pointless for a turn. You know that's going to work. With Nico, like, you set up a massive Hulk turn and it feels great, but you don't need that to win the game. So when we talk about high risk, high reward, what does high reward actually mean? You beat the level better, like you beat it quicker. You're still going to beat it and get 3 stars just by using safer, consistent cards. Wombo combos, you do not need them to win this game. This isn't like a multiplayer game where you have to set up really elaborate wombo combo turns. It's a single player game, and it's a straightforward one at that when you use strong, consistent cards. And when you start thinking along those lines, you start realizing that even if in the best case scenario Nico pulls off incredible wombo combos, you just would have beaten the game, you know, anyway, with safer cards and without the risk. So why bring Nico? And that is what kills her. Iron Man, everyone's favourite shite-hawk capitalist. So what is Iron Man? Iron Man is an extremely greedy damage dealer. He does bring a little bit of utility, like he can add marked, he can add block, but you're bringing him to kill things, basically. His mechanic, which I think is just so thematic, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds of this game here, but I think the way they have designed the characters are just so flavorful when it comes to, when it comes to like representing what their personalities are like in the game. And with Tony Stark, he is extremely greedy. He wants all of the attention, and one of the ways they represent that is through the redraw mechanic. So, you know when you've played this game, when you redraw a card, you discard it and you bring in a new one. But for a lot of Iron Man cards, when you redraw them, you don't discard them, you don't draw a new card, instead you power that card up, right? It'll say redraw to do X, Y, or Z. So with Iron Man, you want to be using your redraws to power up his cards. He wants all the attention. I love it. Very, very, very thematic. So what are his strengths? when he is fully kitted out, right? So when you're in the mid-game, if you're really paying attention to him, or if you're in the late game, he is probably, besides the Hunter, he's the best damage dealer in the game. Okay, better than Ghost Rider, better than Hulk. He is just incredible. He has extremely strong AoE. His AoE is brilliant, and he has extremely strong single target. So, you know, his single target with Surgical Strike, his AoE with Air Superiority, those two cards on their own will win matches for you, and that's the third strength here. When everything is set up for him, he can solo carry a mission quite easily. Like, there is no weakness in terms of damage output. He will do insane single target damage. He will do amazing AoE damage, like Air Superiority. We'll talk about it in best cards, but when you mod this card, it just becomes ridiculous. So what are his weaknesses? He has a pretty terrible early game. So you've heard me say a lot that he's a very greedy person. He needs a lot of attention. So what do I mean by that? I mean, his opening cards are not that great, right? You need to bring in epics and rares and stuff to make him really pop off. So you need Leave It To Me to really get him going. We'll talk about that in best cards. So he can be a little bit slow in the early game. And what makes this even worse is when you bring weak early game characters, you're bringing them to, like, you know, get the gamma coils, right? So you can get their better cards. And you kind of just have to, like, you know, just get through the match carrying this weak character. And the way you do that is you bring them, you draw their crap cards, you redraw the cards, and you hope you draw a card from one of the stronger characters that you've brought. This doesn't work with Iron Man, because Iron Man, when you redraw a lot of his cards, they don't leave your hand, you don't get to draw a new card. So Iron Man, even though he's weak, he's still like, play with me, I want to play, use my card. And that can feel really bad, because a lot of his cards are crap in the early game. So he is a tough person to carry. You also need to focus him on the tactical layer and the strategic layer, right? So on the strategic layer, you need to be getting his gamma coils right from the off, right? You want to be getting those big epics, like you want to be getting Leave It To Me, you want to be getting Air Superiority, and you know, a bunch of his other cards. You want to be getting mods on them, because that's when he really pops off. And that's the strategic layer. So you need to be running him in missions, you need to be getting him gamma coils. The one thing against that is his legendary card is very good, but I don't think it's a requirement. I think you can play a very strong Iron Man without his legendary. But apart from that, you just need to pay attention to him a lot. And also on the tactical layer. So not just do you have to be getting his gamma coils, modding up his abilities, etc., etc. When you actually bring him into a match, even fully kitted out, you need to be paying attention to him, right? You need to be using your redraws on him. You want to be filling your hand with his cards to get off a really good Surgical Strike. He is a very greedy character on both levels, right? So if you're playing with Iron Man, you have to play with Iron Man. Lastly, and this is a niche thing, especially in the higher difficulties, when you die, you don't get a card to res you back up again. Iron Man handles death really badly, right? So when you die in this game, especially in the later difficulties, you're just dead for the mission, right? But your cards remain. So you'll still have the cards of that character in your hand. You'll still be drawing their cards. And when you do, you can't play them. So when this happens, when you have a dead character, what you have to do is you have to just redraw those cards, right? Just get them out of your hand, draw a card from the two surviving characters. Again, like we spoke about, Iron Man, nope. Iron Man will draw a card, you'll try to redraw it, and you'll power up the card of a dead man, right? I can feel Spiderman weeping already. It's just awful, right? So if Iron Man dies, it hurts a lot. So his best cards, no prizes for guessing this, I've mentioned a lot. Leave It To Me is a standout, right? Leave It To Me is so good. All right? Leave It To Me does everything you want him to do, right? You're drawing cards, you're gaining extra redraws. When you've upgraded it, it's not essential to upgrade it, but it is nice. You're getting fast, so you're playing those cards for cheaper. It just does everything for him, right? Iron Man needs redraws to power up his cards. He needs cards to power up his Surgical Strike, and then fast is just a nice to have, right? Leave It To Me is brilliant. Surgical Strike is his single target damage, and it's decent AoE as well. You get Surgical Strike right from the off, so you know you can actually use it as a AoE until you get the final card, Air Superiority. Air Superiority is a nice card. It's a very strong card when you get it off the gate. But when you mod this, oh my god, it's incredible. So in my game, Air Superiority comes with Marked. So because it's like pretty much arena wide, he will mark everyone in the arena straight away when I use air superiority. So I will like prioritize this to use this on turn 1, and now I'm playing a match where all of the enemies on the field are marked. Now I can just kill them for free. It's unbelievable. You can get other mods. You can put vulnerable on them, for example. I have another air superiority that applies vulnerable. Yeah, so good, so good. So to sum up, he is, and I mentioned this in the Ghost Rider a bit, he is the strongest DPS companion. When you have everything put together, when you have his really good cards, when you have them modded, he scales better than Ghost Rider, and he scales better than Hulk, and he scales better than Magik. He's just incredibly strong. It's very thematic. He is just an extremely greedy character, right? So to get to that, you have to commit, and that's what I spoke about in the weaknesses, right? But, and this is the last thing I'll say about him, he is worth it, okay? It kind of feels bad when you bring Iron Man along and you're like, oh, this guy is really weighing me down. Iron Man is a hard carry, right? I don't know if you're familiar with MOBAs, but hard carries, they start off crap, but you feed them enemies, you feed them experience, and in the end of the game, they'll become the strongest characters, and it'll be worth carrying them. And that is very much Iron Man. Iron Man is absolutely worth carrying. And it's not like, we're not talking about end game here. Like, if you're focusing on him enough, Iron Man in the mid game will be fine, right? You just need Leave It to Me, and you just need air superiority, and then you mod them, especially mod air superiority, and there he goes, right? He's brilliant. So yeah, he does start off slow, but he is absolutely worth persevering with. He is a very strong character when you have all the pieces lined up. Magik. Magik is a really interesting displacement-based damage character. So what do I mean by that? Well, her whole thing is centered around portals. You set up portals in the map and you point them towards things, and then you use another move that she has that can punt people through the portal and into the area that you want them to be. Her whole thing is around displacing enemies, moving them around into places that you want them, and most, I think importantly, hitting them into things that you want to hit them into. So what are her strengths? Well, her main one, like I just said, is enemy positioning. So pushing an enemy into anything you want is so strong, especially because we're talking about like environmentals here, right? You're in a tough early game fight that has those electric boxes, right? Usually they're in the corners of the map, so it's actually quite difficult to hit the exact target you want into the electric box. You kind of just have to like either get very lucky, or you just have to kind of, you know, take what you can get, right? Any enemy close to an electric box, punt them in. Magik, no. You can put any enemy you want into an electric box, right? You just set up the portal, point it towards the box, and then punt that enemy through the portal. So good. Ley lines are another one. Ley lines will start to come into the game towards like the late early game, and ley lines are an AoE explosive that apply something. So they'll either apply, there's 3 of them I think, and I remember 2, vulnerable or weak. Can't remember, a stun. They're the 3, vulnerable, weak, or stun. And they are so strong. And again, Magik can say, hey, I want this enemy into, I want to stun, I want to weaken, or I want to make vulnerable this enemy. She can do it. You don't need to care about where they're positioned, anything like that. There's an enemy I think called the Hydra Specialist, I think it's called. It's the support Hydra enemy that will like kind of, you know, heal his fellow bad guys, etc. When you hit someone into him, when he has a shield up, he has a shock shield, and that does a lot of damage to the enemy that you're punting into. You can just punt whatever enemy you want into that and do a load of extra damage, right? So there are just so many uses of Portal, and you do it straight from the off, right? She has Portal as part of her starting kit, and she has cards that can punt people through portals as part of her starting kit. You can do that from mission 1, and it is so strong. Other strengths of hers, she is very good early AoE damage with the card Gather. Gather absolutely does fall off in the mid game, and you're going to have other characters with way better AoE. But for 2 heroism, it does, you know, quite a lot of damage and will gather people up. Now, it doesn't work perfectly, right? I mean, a lot of the time I've tried to like gather enemies around, you know, an explosive or something like that, or a telephone pole or something that I want to drop on them, and they don't fall in the way you want them to drop, right? It's not great for that. It is very good, however, for just doing good early game damage. She is also a strong damage dealer into the late game when you get the card Limbo's Grasp, but she is reliant on that card to actually do damage. in the late game. And then finally, her last strength, which is, I'm leaving it till last, but it's so good. Is her utility. She has Banish. We've spoken about Ghost Rider. We've spoken about Doctor Strange. You know now how I feel about Conceal. Banish, again, isn't even a Conceal. It's a remove from the map. You can do that to any ally or an enemy. And that then adds up a wealth of possibilities when you can actually do it to an enemy. Because, you can just remove a big threat from one turn, especially if that big threat is like, doing something that you really don't want to do that turn, or it's guarding something, etc., etc. Banish just gets rid of it entirely. And then also it does the really good stuff that Doctor Strange can do, which is you bring a tank, that tank taunts everything, you banish the tank, right? Really, really strong. Very, very good. And then her legendary, which is one of the best legendaries in the game, in my opinion, it's called Darkchild. It will taunt everything and just basically make her immune. So it is a get out of jail free card for one turn. It is so strong. There's turns that I brought Magik where just I was in a lot of trouble. I'd bring her with maybe a weak character or maybe 2 weak characters, and I just had a bad early game, and now I'm facing a ton of damage next turn. Darkchild, hey, let's just not care about this turn. That's what that card is. So strong. So what are her weaknesses? This is a bit niche. Similar to the other very strong characters in this game, she doesn't really have massive weaknesses. The only thing I can kind of bring here is she can lack a bit of DPS in the late early game when Gather falls off, but you haven't got Limbo's Grasp yet. And then when you do have Limbo's Grasp, she is a kind of a slow burner, right? So the way you start doing big damage with Magik is you stack Limbo's Grasp, right? So you cast it several times, and all of a sudden you're booting through people into portals, and they're actually going through hell. Like, they are coming out with just a ton of damage onto them, into whatever you want to throw them into. It's insane. But up until that part, she won't compete with Iron Man or Ghost Rider, for example, in pure numbers until you've stacked up Limbo's Grasp enough. But I mean, still. And then finally, this is being really petty. Her Conceal only works on an ally or an enemy, not herself. This is, there have been times, to be honest, where I've had Banish and I've been like, oh, okay, brilliant, I'm okay, because I haven't brought Doctor Strange. Magik's about to take a bunch of damage this turn, and I just realized, oh no, actually crap, I can't banish myself. Damn. That is a bit tricky, but you just bring a tank, right? Just bring a tank with taunt, and it just doesn't matter anymore. So our best cards, Limbo Portal, simple as, we've spoken about displacement and how good it is. Limbo Portal is what does that. Limbo's Grasp is what will give her damage as you go into the mid game and the late game. Banish, again, we've spoken about Banish. We don't need to speak about it more. This whole ability to just remove someone from the map is just, in my opinion, broken. And then finally, I'm giving her a fourth best card because she's that good. It's Darkchild. A lot of the time, characters will have this legendary that's like a nice to have. We're talking about Iron Man, for example, or we're talking about Ghost Rider, her other 2 top DPS rivals. And they're a nice to have, but they do the job without it. Magik, Darkchild just adds another feather to her bow, right? Darkchild does something that she doesn't do before, right? So when you bring Darkchild in, all of a sudden, you're now able to just skip a whole turn, right? And that's just so strong. So Magik is, no surprises here, just an incredible companion. Positioning enemies is amazing, especially if you're on levels with stun boxes or ley lines. You can get so much work done with Magik. Banish and Darkchild just lets you ignore a ton of problems, and she's not even a support, right? That's what's absolutely amazing about Magik. She's doing incredible damage with stacked up Limbo's Grasps. She's hitting environmentals that you wouldn't ordinarily hit, certainly not with the targets that you want to hit. And then, hey, she has Banish or Darkchild to completely get you out of a tough turn. Stuff that Doctor Strange would bring, that you love Doctor Strange for. She can do that with Banish and Darkchild. So good. When she stacks Limbo's Grasp, she turns into an incredible damage dealer. And in terms of damage as well, Gather is just an extremely useful early game damage dealer. You bring in the early game, you use Gather, and you use the environmentals as best as you can, and she's just an incredible hero. Magik, absolutely up there with one of the best companions in the game. Whenever you bring her, as long as you're using her displacement smartly, just incredible character. You'll never feel bad for bringing Magik into a match. Okay, we move on to the first unlockable character in Midnight Suns, and that is Spiderman. So what is Spiderman? He's a utility-based DPS character who can use the environment probably more than anyone else. So his whole thing is he has a lot of cards that allow him extra moves, lets him use environmental objects for free and increases their damage. His passive as well kind of has a chance to refund the heroism that you use for environmentals. So his whole thing is, Spider-Manning around the map, throwing environmental objects at people, throwing people into environmental objects, and doing a ton of damage with those. So his strengths. When you have the cards, he can do incredible damage in the first turn. So when you combine his legendary Infernal Spider and Opportunist, you can just clear all the environmentals on the map and output a ton of damage. Even if you're listening to this and you're in the early game with Spider-Man, if you don't have the legendary, that's still okay. Just using Opportunist on a map with lots of environmentals will absolutely wreak havoc. He has a bind, and any character with a bind is useful on missions with high health dangerous enemies, especially missions where the shield character is blocking the object that you want to get to. The bind is really good for that. And he's also very good in missions that require you to kill lots of low health targets quickly in one turn, basically. So we're talking about Nest Mother missions, which are a Lilin type mission that you get in the second half of the game. She summons a bunch of totems every turn, but the totems are all minions. Spider-Man can absolutely clear them very, very quickly. And then also any missions that require you to simply survive, because that mission will usually throw lots of fodder at you, and Spider-Man is excellent at clearing fodder very, very quickly. So what are his weaknesses? Well, you will quickly realize that Spider-Man is a damage-based character that can't really do damage with his cards. So that's a problem. A lot of his cards they just don't match up with the other damage dealer cards. When you compare him to Spider-Man or Ghost Rider or Magik or Hulk, his cards just are weak. They just do not output enough damage. So you need to be using the environmentals to really generate value on Spider-Man. And that brings me to the second point. When you're using environmentals, he's great, right? He's doing good damage. But if that fight lasts past the environmentals, or you're in a fight with few environmentals or weak environmentals, he just feels bad, right? You're not getting the proper damage value out of him. And there have been a lot of fights where really his only use to me has been his bind, right? That's kind of the only reason that he's generating any value in a match at all. So what are his best cards? Well, the bind, Thwip, is just always good. It's always useful. Then Opportunist, we spoke about, just so good at using those environmentals, which is really what he's about. And then finally his legendary Infernal Spider makes him really pop off, especially like I mentioned, if you combine Infernal Spider and Opportunist in turn 1, he can output a ton of damage, providing your environmentals are good enough. The thing about Spider-Man is, and this is kind of sad to say, but if you're min-maxing this game, so if you want the highest amount of value out of this game, you're only bringing the best characters, you'll never use Spider-Man, right? So he can do well with environmentals, and if you draw Infernal Spider and Opportunist on turn 1 on a map with good environmentals, so everything's lining up, his turn 1 will be very, very strong. But even then, when everything is in his favor, I've had better turn 1s with Iron Man. Thwip, his bind is excellent, and it can bypass a lot of tricky missions, like I said, so you have a high health minion with a shield. But again, you could just bring Doctor Strange and a better DPS, right? Or you could just bring Magik, who can banish that kind of blocking enemy and provide just so much more than Spider-Man can provide. It's hard to justify bringing him, right? He just does not line up with the other strong companions in the game. But in his favor, there are other characters in the game that we'll talk about in a while now, who just bring literally nothing to the table. That really has sat there and done nothing. I've had matches with characters that we'll talk about a bit now where I just haven't used a card from them the whole fight. Spider-Man with stuff like Quick Kick and Thwip on a common and Opportunist on a rare, he will always have an input in a fight, right? Using Opportunist and just using those environmentals, why not? They're free, they do good damage, decent damage. You'll never feel like, oh, I can't use any Spider-Man cards, right? But it's just when you use them and you're really comparing them to the top characters in this game, he falls short. Okay, up next is Captain America. So Captain America is a tank Just a straightforward tank with excellent buffs and debuffs and lots of card draw. There's no real hidden mechanic to Captain America. There's no real kind of smart way to play him. He's basically just like if you've played Dungeons & Dragons or any RPGs, he's the fighter class, right? He is very straightforward. He's just back to basics. He does what it says in the tin, basically. So what are his strengths? He is the best tank in the game, and it's not even close, right? There's not a competition here. He is by far the best tank in the game, which makes him, because you do need tanks in certain missions, one of the best characters in the game. He can amass a ton of block. He can apply such a key debuff for a tank in weak, and he can do that in an AoE. And he can add counter to himself, which makes him really good with the best defense, which is a card that generates block through attacking. He has excellent card draw. I went through his card list and noticed that 50% of his cards come with a draw card keyword. So he will draw you a ton of cards. And there's just no gimmicks to his tanking. So like we spoke about Captain Marvel, and in terms of how she's a tank that doesn't want to lose block. And there are 2 more tanks we need to talk about on this list. And they all have gimmicks to them, right? Captain America, there's just no gimmicks. He just amasses a lot of block. He taunts people. He weakens them. And he just doesn't get hurt, right? It's just as simple as that. And then we mentioned as well that he can add block to himself through adding counter and then using the best defense. His weaknesses, like, again, there are no real weaknesses here. I'm just being picky. He doesn't have a conceal or a heal, so, yeah, okay. And then the other tanks will do more damage. Like, he probably is beaten on the damage meter, but, like, you don't need him to do damage. He's tanking. That's all you need him to do. So what are his best cards? Well, Shield Bounce, especially upgraded for the weak, is incredible. This is his main card for me. Like, you're taunting a bunch of enemies, you're adding weak to them. All of a sudden there, they can't really do much to you because they have weak and they're all taunted, and it's a giant AoE and it does good damage as well. Like, yeah, that's another point. It is a giant AoE. So that is, like, really important to mention because he can hit a ton of enemies with this card. Tactician is just a really solid card, does a lot of stuff that you want from Captain America and you want from a tank in general. And then you need to combine these 2 together, but Dig In Plus and the best defense combo. So what makes this so strong is you give yourself counter and then you add on the best defense. So every time you get hit, when it's their turn, Captain America will hit back and generate block on that. So, like, I've had turns where I've been hit for way more than my max block, but I've actually not taken any health damage because Captain America just keeps generating block on like the enemy's turn, and that makes him such a strong tank. Like, there's nothing to say about Captain America, right? He is so straightforward. He has no gimmicks compared to all the other tanks in the game. For that reason, there's an argument that he's the only pure tank in the game, or kind of like Doctor Strange, that he just invalidates the role, right? So if you want to support, you're bringing Doctor Strange, and if you want a tank, you're bringing Captain America. And if you pick any other characters for those 2 roles, it just feels bad. Once you've got that lovely taste of America, you just want them. You just want more of them, right? You're bringing Captain Marvel, and you're just like, oh, why do I have a tank that doesn't want to be hit? When Captain America is sitting at home reading a book, and he loves being hit, there's just no messing around with him. While as well, the best defense is an epic, he doesn't require high tier cards. I would argue he doesn't even really need the best defense. The best defense is what kind of completes him for me, makes him just an incredible tank at the higher difficulties, especially in the late game. But he doesn't require high tier cards like, Shield Bounce and Tactician and, all the other commons that he has are just super duper strong. If you're bringing a tank, you're bringing Captain America. He is extremely straightforward and he is extremely, extremely good. Wolverine. So Wolverine is a tank with a lot of lifesteal and chain attacks. So the way he works is he tanks by taking a lot of damage. He can't generate block for himself. There's no natural block cards that he gets. But he takes a lot of damage and then he heals himself afterwards through lifesteal and a few other kind of healing cards that he gets. Another thing is if he dies, he also comes with a card that lets him resurrect, which is a free card play but does cost 2 heroism. And worth noting here is when you're playing on a regular difficulty, when someone dies, you will generate a card to res them back up again. When you're playing on higher difficulties, you don't get that, but you do if you're Wolverine. You will get one-time use of a card that brings him back from the death. So that's nice. Strengths. He has a ton of chain attacks. A load of his cards have chain, and that is ripe for modding. If you get lucky with mods, you can really kind of pop off here at Wolverine, and you can really combo well with other characters. So if you get a big chain with Bleed, for example, works really well with Blade, or if you get a big chain with Marked, works really well with big AoE damage dealers. So he can synergize well if you get lucky with mods. He can grant himself Strength, which combos very well with chain attacks. He can apply Weak with Stink of Fear Plus, and we spoke about Captain America. Captain America has that big shield bash with Weak. Being able to taunt things and apply Weak is just really, really strong. And then, like I mentioned at the top, he's the only character that can be brought back from the dead on higher difficulties. So what are his weaknesses? Well, similar to Captain Marvel, and kind of we hinted at this in the Captain America segment, he's a tank that doesn't want to tank, basically, right? Because he cannot generate block. He has a decent sized health pool, but on higher difficulties, yes, you may have lifesteal and you might be able to heal that all back up, but he'll die before that, right? He'll die before his turn, and a lot of times I've just thought, I can't tank now with Wolverine because he will die. And what really compounds that is a lot of his best cards come with the taunt keyword, which means if you use them too freely, he'll just die. So a lot of cases I've been playing with Wolverine and I want to use that strong card that he has, but I know if I do so, I'll taunt, and if I taunt, I'll just die. And he's a tank that doesn't want to taunt, which just doesn't make sense to me. And he just is so reliant on higher difficulties on someone that can provide him resist or preferably conceal. You want to pair him up with a Doctor Strange, you want to pair him up with a Magik. So, in that case, he can freely taunt whoever he wants and he doesn't have to worry about the incoming damage. So in that way, yeah, he can work, but you have to pair him with someone. So his best cards, I just want to note at the top here, probably more so than any other hero in this game, this will change drastically with mods. So like I said at the top, he has a lot of chain attacks. If you get a good mod on a chain, that's his best card, right? Simple as. But just talking, at a base level without mods, it's Lethal Pounce, it's Stink of Fear, and then it's Eviscerate. Okay, so Lethal Pounce to generate your strength. Eviscerate is a big, nice chain. If you can combine the two, if you're using Eviscerate on a strength, that feels really, really good. And then Stink of Fear, obviously, with the weak. So, like, Wolverine, I don't know, it's hard to sum up here because if you roll well on mods, he is a good hero, right? He can pop off with other heroes, but he is just so reliant on backup. You have to babysit him. So no matter what mods you get, he will always be a tank that needs to be babysat. He will always be a tank that does not want to tank. So, no matter what, you have to have a second tank along with him, or you need some heavy support. You need Magik running Banish, you need Doctor Strange running Vapors of Voltor. If you do not babysit Wolverine on the higher difficulties, he will die. Absolutely no questions asked. And if you don't get lucky with mods and you don't want to grind them out, he is never worth bringing, right? Because then he's just a tank that doesn't want to tank and can't even provide, good damage. He's just like, he just doesn't do what you want to do. Like, he's a tank that doesn't want to tank no matter what. So you'd always rather bring Captain America. And so if you're saying, oh, well, he's a brawler, I have good mods, I'm bringing, he's more of a damage character than a tank. It doesn't compare then. If you're in that realm, he doesn't come close to comparing with Iron Man, with Ghost Rider, with Magik, hell, even Blade. Like, I'd rather bring Blade. So just, there's a problem with tanking in this game, and they're too gimmicky, right? You have your straightforward Captain America who just does the normal tanking stuff. He's the best tank in the game. All the other tanks come with their gimmicks, and when you play on a higher difficulty, the gimmicks just break down with the amount of damage you're taking, and Wolverine is massively susceptible to that. Scarlet Witch. So Scarlet Witch is a strange sort of damage dealer with some added support utility. So why is she strange? Well, she has no real simple way of doing anything, really. None of her cards are straightforward, and all of her good cards, they require like a bit of setup to get value from. So what are her strengths? Well, I'm gonna put the cart before the horse here and just say she is kind of like Quick Toss Witch. Like, Quick Toss is one of her cards that she gets. It's a quick and a knockback in any direction when you upgrade it, with damage already on the card. And that combination is extremely useful. Like, remember what we said about Ghost Rider and how good Lash is? Kind of similar with Scarlet Witch. It's not as good as Lash. I know it doesn't deal damage to her, but it's not as good as Lash, but it's still very good. And I've had a lot of fights where I have literally only used that card with her. When things line up for her, she can do a lot of damage. Okay, Detonate is an extremely powerful turn 1 option, although it will rob you of pretty much all the environmentals for the rest of the fight just because of how big the AoE damage is, but it will provide a ton of damage at the start of the fight. And then she has another card, Chaos Reigns, and that can do absurd amounts of damage if you get multiple big elite targets in the radius, because they'll swing at each other and they do huge damage. If you get lucky, they'll swing at each other twice, and the actual numbers that you can rack up by big, scary enemies hitting each other is incredible. Her legendary No More is odd. It does kill her, and when you're playing higher difficulties, you've no way of getting her back. In the lower difficulties, yeah, you can bring her back, or you can use it as a finisher, but it hurts your star rating, right? But there is a little combo, maybe a bit of a cheese combo that you can use to keep Scarlet Witch alive, and that's giving her lifesteal. So if you have lifesteal on No More, she'll actually heal herself and she won't die. And you can guarantee this by bringing in the combat item Vampiric Essence. So, you don't even need things to line up. You just bring Vampiric Essence, you draw No More, and you can use it together. And when you do, that's actually a very strong card. She also brings some decent utility with cards that can provide, good stuff like Marked or Resist, although the Resist is a little bit finicky to use. Weaknesses. I think she's the worst starting deck in the game. The cards, when you get her, are absolute garbage. Like, they are absolutely terrible. When I was like carrying Scarlet Witch to try and get her Gamma Coils, she was just standing there and doing nothing. So you remember when we were doing the Spider-Man section, I was talking about how Spider-Man, even though he's not amazing, he'll always have some input, and I've had characters that have just spent a whole fight doing absolutely nothing. Scarlet Witch is one of those characters. Before you get Quick Toss, she just sometimes just might do nothing in an entire fight. I have just not touched any of her cards throughout a whole fight, and it's entirely up to the other two characters to win the fight. Her main problem, though, is when you get everything together, you would assume that, she's a late game character. You just need to get her some, her rares, her epics, her legendary, and then she's good. But despite her cards looking strong on paper, I never really feel like I'm getting the full value out of the card play. Like, I've done huge damage with Chaos Reigns, for example, but even when I managed to pulling it off, getting a number of big elites in the radius still feels like a wasted card play. I don't know really how to explain that. It just doesn't feel good. And similarly with something like Hexmark, while applying Marked is very nice, at this point in the game, a lot of my characters are applying Marked while doing something else. I just never feel like when I use a big Scarlet Witch card, I never really feel satisfied afterwards. I never really feel like I've got enough done. And so, even fully kitted out, I've just spent a lot of missions where she just uses Quick Toss. I can't find value in anything else, really. So her best cards, it's obviously Quick Toss. The Quick Toss is just a very good, solid card. And I'll add in No More if you're using Lifesteal, because at that point, it's just a very, very strong card that is easy to use, does a lot of damage. There's no downsides to it. One thing I'll say about her is, one thing that gets thrown at her, which I've read a lot, that I think is unfair, is how late you get her, right? So we spoke about how she is such a bad opening card deck, and you do get her quite late in the game, but I don't think you get her so late that it's impossible to get her Gamma Coils, even without spending a lot of time grinding. There is enough time in the game left to work on her deck and replace them. I will concede, however, that you do need to stall the game out quite a lot if you want to get the legendary card. That is true. You need to kind of just grind that out. And if you're playing the type of game where you're saying, I'm not going to do many side quests, I'm just going to try and main story it with a few side quests that I have to do, you're not going to get the legendary on Scarlet Witch. How do I say this? I spent a lot of time thinking that Scarlet Witch is an awkward but high skill cap character, right? So her cards are weird, but they look powerful. It's hard to get to use them correctly. And I've played enough of these games to have this kind of like sense that when I see a row of cards like this, or even like in an RPG, a row of abilities, that I can kind of sense the power, but I'm just not really, getting it out in the game. My first sense is I'm just not playing it properly, right? I'm not playing her correctly. I haven't found the right combination of cards to use to get her the full extent of her power. And I'm expecting to either to click or for me to read a post on Reddit or watch something on YouTube that fully, explains to me, better player tells me how to actually play Scarlet Witch. But I haven't found that yet. And I've played her a lot and I've used every combination of cards, and even when I think I'm getting good value out of her cards, like we mentioned Chaos Reigns for example, I just end up keep using Quick Toss. Like she just ends up being Quick Toss, and at this point I have to just say, if I can't delay this video any longer, I have to just say that she's a weak character. That's it. She is just a weak character. Even if things line up for her and she gets like a huge Detonate or a huge Chaos Reigns, or you're bringing no more in lifesteal, like it's just doesn't feel great to me. If someone tells me in the future that no, actually this is the way you play her, I will fully believe them. Okay, she's, like I said, she's one of those characters. She's awkward. I think she could be a high skill cap character, and I'm just not getting it. So this is one I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. If you are playing Scarlet Witch at a high difficulty and she is performing consistently well for you, tell me, please tell me. Tell me where I'm going wrong. Tell me what cards I'm missing, because right now I have to just say she's not good. Last but not least, we have Hulk. So Hulk is a tank / damage dealer that it can output incredible amounts of damage using extremely high cost cards. So the way Hulk works is he has a rage mechanic which increases through either being damaged or using certain cards. Each stack of rage will greatly increase his offense. So the way you want to play him is you want to tank, you want to take damage, you want to get a lot of rage, and then you want to do a ton of damage using your rage on those cards. So what are his strengths? In terms of damage output per card usage, when you have stacked up to 5 rage, no one can touch Hulk. I don't even think the Hunter can touch Hulk, and the Hunter is absolutely broken in this game. His legendary card is a map-wide AoE knockback, and if you use it on 5 rage, it will decimate the board. Like, it will do a ton of damage. It won't kill everything. There are high health enemies in the game that will shrug it off, but it will do just so much damage. Unlike Scarlet Witch, his legendary card, the one we just talked about, is very easy to get, as it doesn't rely on the relationship mechanic, so you don't need to grind that out. It's done through research and bringing Hulk on 3 missions. I think it's a research project, then bring Hulk on 3 missions, and then another research project. But it's a combination of those 3 things. Anyway, it's very easy to do. He can add in some decent modifiers, so he has a card that'll stun. I think he's 2 cards that'll stun. He has a card that'll give him counter, and he has a card that'll apply weak. So, we've spoken about all of those keywords. They're all very good. He is an excellent target for Nico's Empower. We spoke about this during Nico's bit, but like his heroics, all of his cards really are very, very expensive, but we're talking about heroics here because that's what Empower hits. It will allow Hulk to play those cards way easier. And finally, a small one here, but he doesn't pick up an injury on death, which is very useful because Hulk is going to die a lot. Which brings me to weaknesses. Hulk is another tank who can't tank. Similar to Wolverine, he doesn't apply block to himself, so when he's taking damage, he's taking it all to the flesh. That's a weird way of saying it. And on the higher difficulties, despite the amount of health that he can get, he will die incredibly quickly if you're using him as a proper tank. Like if you're using him as Captain America, he will die very, very quickly. What makes it worse is, unlike Wolverine, who can taunt the board and then be concealed, Hulk wants to take damage to stack his rage, because if you don't have rage up, there is no point in using Hulk. So this is a real cat and mouse game, I think, where you want Hulk to take enough damage to bring his rage up, but not so much to kill him, and that is very, very difficult to balance on the hardest difficulties. Another small one here, but he has no quick at all, so that is really annoying. You would hope that he would have, like, similar to Captain Marvel, he would have a quick attack that would generate rage, the way Captain Marvel has a quick attack that generates their binary. Nope. I've been told that you can get quick on his Smash card, but I haven't found it. I've probably applied almost 100 mods onto Smash. I'm probably over 100 mods at this stage, and I haven't found quick, so either I am very, very unlucky, or there is no quick on that card. And then finally, his cards just cost too much. They are just too expensive. There are certain cards, like his legendary World Breaker, which are worth the cost. It's worth the 6 heroism. But other cards, other strong cards, like Thunderclap, for example, which sounds really good on paper, but it's just not worth the 4 heroism. It's just not worth it. So what are his best cards? His best cards are World Breaker. That's it. That's what you bring him for, World Breaker. So I put one card on Hulk's best card list, which is me being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the more I kind of think about it, and the more I think about how I play Hulk, I think the more true it is. You can absolutely use his other cards, and when you're at a high rage, they do incredible damage. They all do. But the issue is, number 1, they cost so much heroism. Number 2, none of them have quick, so they all use up a card play. And number 3, they almost all consume rage. So when you're using them, it really hurts World Breaker, which in my opinion is what you're bringing Hulk for. So speaking of, the way I get most value out of Hulk is I stack up a bunch of rage using a combination of damage and his card challenged in Roar. Then I either get my heroism up very quickly to 6, or I get lucky with Nico's and Power. I will confess here, I did on my New Game Plus get a mod for challenging Roar, which gave me 4 heroism when I use it. So I'm actually with Hulk able to achieve both objectives through one card pretty much. Like I stack a bunch of rage and I almost have the 6 heroism just through one card. So basically that's the way you do it, right? You get the rage up, you get your heroism up, and you use World Breaker as quickly as possible, and that is literally all he does for me. That's it. That is the best I think you can use the Hulk for. If you're doing on lower difficulties, that's the one thing actually, I haven't actually tested Hulk on lower difficulties. He's one of the, I think he's like the only character I haven't properly tested on like normal and the heroics, because I got him towards the end of my first playthrough and that was on New Game Plus, and then I brought him into New Game Plus and I just started that on Ultimate 3. So maybe when he's, you know, if you're playing at a normal difficulty, he can tank. And if that's the case, you know, if you're sitting here listening to this and you're playing with Hulk on a lower difficulty and he is able to tank the hits and generate rage, then yeah, he's very good. Fair enough, he's very good. But the way I'm playing him, the difficulties that I'm playing on, he just cannot tank, and it's very difficult to stack up rage. And really, the only reason you want to bring him is for World Breaker. And even then, if I'm min-maxing, then it's very difficult to justify bringing Hulk. Like I said before, consistent, reliable damage is how you win this game, and consistent, reliable cards is how you win this game. Using Iron Man, using Magik, Ghost Rider, and the Hunter in terms of damage, that's all you need. But it is fun and it is effective if you get max rage, use your World Breaker on turn 1. It will cut the difficulty of the mission in half, like straight away. It's just a bit awkward to set up, and it's not as reliable as the better damage dealing characters in the game, like Iron Man, like Magik, like Ghost Rider. So he is a fun character to use, I will admit. World Breaker is great, but I don't know, it's difficult to justify bringing him. Alright, that is everyone. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I really enjoy doing these kind of like breakdowns. If you're into Slay the Spire, I have Slay the Spire videos that kind of, go along the same lines. I would love to hear your opinions on this. Like, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of my opinions here in this video. So I'd love to hear, what have I got wrong? If you agree with me, please tell me. There are a few characters that I've said that are weak, Scarlet Witch being one. But even like, Hulk, Spiderman, if you're getting them to work on a high difficulty, please tell me. I'd love to hear it. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. I'd really appreciate a subscription or something like that. It would be brilliant. I'm a small channel. So yeah, if you enjoy it, there'll be more coming. So until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later.